January 3rd, 2026, 2:47 a.m. local time. In the hills above Caracas, 7 million people slept. They had no idea that in the next 90 seconds, their world would be torn apart. Somewhere over the Caribbean, flying at 25,000 feet, formation of aircraft that officially did not exist was minutes from Venezuelan airspace. Their target, the presidential palace. Their mission, the capture of one man. Nicolas Maduro had been warned. For months, Donald Trump had promised this moment would come. But Maduro never believed America would actually do it. He was wrong. What followed was the largest American military operation in Latin America since the 1989 invasion of Panama. And like Panama, it would end with a dictator in American custody. But this story doesn't begin in the flames of Caracas. It begins for months earlier in the calm waters of the Caribbean, where the first shots of an undeclared war were about to be fired. The Caribbean has always been a highway. For centuries, ships have crossed these waters, carrying everything from sugar to slaves, from tourists to drugs. By 2025, the Trump administration claimed that Venezuela had become the epicenter of a new kind of trafficking operation. Small boats, they said, loaded with fentanyl, were slipping out of Venezuelan ports and making their way north toward American shores. There was just one problem: they had no proof. In September 2025, President Trump authorized what he called Operation Southern Spear. The stated objective was counter-narcotics. The real objective, according to critics, was something else entirely. On September 12th, an American MQ-9 Reaper drone, operating from a base in Puerto Rico, locked onto a small fishing vessel approximately 80 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast. The drone's thermal cameras showed 5 people on board. At 3:47 p.m. local time, the Reaper fired. 2 Hellfire missiles struck the boat within seconds of each other. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but debris floating on the surface. 5 people were dead. No drugs were ever recovered. It was the first strike of many, and it was only the beginning. Over the next 3 months, American forces conducted more than 30 strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. The Pentagon's own numbers tell the story: 107 people killed, 0 drugs recovered from any vessel. The administration called them narco-terrorists. International observers called them something else: fishermen. One strike in particular drew international condemnation. On November 15th, American aircraft attacked a vessel in international waters. When survivors were spotted in the water, a second strike was ordered. This double tap killed the survivors as they tried to stay afloat. United Nations human rights experts were appalled. They condemned the strikes as violations of the right to life, noting that those killed were not posing any immediate threat which could justify the use of lethal force. But the Trump administration wasn't listening. In fact, they were just getting started. In November 2025, the Trump administration played its trump card. They designated the Venezuelan government itself as a foreign terrorist organization, not a drug cartel, and not a rebel group. The actual sitting government of a sovereign nation. The legal implications were staggering. Under American law, once an entity is designated as a terrorist organization, the gloves come off. Normal rules of engagement no longer apply. The president gains extraordinary powers to authorize lethal force. Maduro wasn't just a dictator anymore. In the eyes of American law, he was now the leader of a terrorist organization, and there was a price on his head. The bounty for Maduro's capture had started at $15 million during Trump's first term in 2020. Biden raised it to $25 million. But in August 2025, Trump went further than anyone expected: $50 million. It was the largest bounty ever placed on a sitting head of state by the United States government. While the diplomatic war escalated, something else was happening in the Caribbean. Something that hadn't been seen since the Cold War. The United States was assembling an armada. At the center of this force was the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced and most expensive warship ever built. At 100,000 tons, carrying over 75 aircraft, the Ford represented the absolute pinnacle of American military power projection. But the Ford didn't come alone. By December 2025, the American military presence in the Caribbean had grown to over 15,000 troops. F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters were deployed to bases in Puerto Rico. Special Operations Command positioned assets throughout the region. And in the skies above, A constant rotation of surveillance aircraft watched Venezuela's every move. It was the largest American military buildup in Latin America since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. For Venezuela, the message was clear. You are surrounded. In December 2025, Trump announced what he called a complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. American warships would intercept any vessel attempting to do business with the Maduro regime. For Venezuela, this was an existential threat. Oil was the country's lifeblood. It accounted for over 95% of export earnings. Without oil revenue, the already struggling economy would collapse entirely. The UN human rights experts didn't mince words. They called the blockade an armed attack under Article 51 of the UN Charter, one that gravely endangers the human right to life and other rights in Venezuela and the region. They pointed out something troubling. Under international law, the United States was doing could constitute the crime of aggression, the supreme international crime that encompasses within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. But international law had never stopped the United States before. Stay tuned for Part 2. Subscribe Shadowworks History